Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and today I will be talking about LOTRO's future, of which very little has been officially announced. The developers have kept quiet regarding where we will be going after the Fate of Gundabad expansion, which just finished up the Legacy of Durn and the Trials of the Dwarves storyline. But at the moment, I believe Harad is the most likely location of the next major update and of course eventually expansion for LOTRO. Going back to what we know about LOTRO in 2022, from what has been said by Standing Stone Games scattered about is 1. The next major update will be moving on from Gundabad since that storyline is finished, and 2. They are open to doing Wildwood-like updates, and 3. Volume 5, which started with the Great Wedding, will continue at some point. So for the last 2, there have been no official announcements regarding these, and for the Wildwood-like update, them being open to that style of update is no guarantee we will actually get another below level cap zone in 2022. But regarding Volume 5, that is actually our first, but perhaps not even biggest hint that Harad is coming next for LOTRO's main storyline. In the Great Wedding quest text, there are references to enemies fleeing to places like Umbar, which is located along the coast in Harad, and it is overrun by Haradrim and of course their Corsairs. We also know that while Sauron is defeated, evil is not gone from Arda and Middle-earth. There are still powerful enemies to be dealt with in Harad, and Volume 5 gives the in-game storyline context of that. So my suspicion is that if Volume 5 were to be continued, it might eventually lead to Harad, or at least the Harad storyline can piggyback off of that if they do it like the Black Book of Mordor, or the Legacy of Durn outside of like the Volume quests. But this ongoing storyline in the South is not actually the biggest reason I believe Harad is going to be LOTRO's next update and again eventually expansion. So the biggest reason is Harad may actually already be in the game right now, and when I first saw this I immediately thought that this was a hint that we are going to Harad next. In the Gundabad 3-man instance, the Den of Puglok, the boss Puglok in that, he sends you on visions of Puglok during the boss fight. So there are 6 total visions that are a trippy take on familiar locations. Well, at least that is true for 5 of the visions, but the 6th vision is a place that I have never seen anything like in LOTRO. It is a proper warm desert, which also happens to be what Harad is, a desert. So with this being a desert, at the very least, my guess is Standing Stone Games was working on world building a desert, and they might have used those assets in this instance at the very least again. But my suspicions are that it is a little bit more than that given the context of the instance and all that is going on in the vision. It honestly just seems like too much to me to not be a piece of upcoming content in LOTRO. So there are actually plenty of details in this vision, or at least in the desert in this vision, in the small enclosed place that we have. So 1, there is cracked earth, so it is dry. There is also blowing sand and piles of sand. And 3, there are dead trees like a desert. And then 4th, while unrealistic, there is a thunderstorm mob and there are whirlwinds there, which that seems to fit the general fantasy genre of having like air/lightning elementals in deserts, while again unrealistic. So that is what we actually have in game from the vision of Puglok. I'm curious if you all think it is a sign that we are actually going to Harad or perhaps something else, so please do let me know. But personally, for my thoughts, because it is the only vision not in a familiar place, and given the other hints of Harad, I believe that it is enough evidence to support Harad as the most likely place in the future. That said, it is entirely possible that this was just some sort of like proof of concept type thing from the world builders or something like that, and it is ultimately meaningless. The final suggestion that it is in fact not Harad is the exact landscape that is there, which is more cracked dirt and even some fiery locations. So I have not found much information online to suggest Harad would quite look like this. Also, Harad is quite far away from anything that we have in LOTRO right now. One potential option for the game is to have us ride in on boats eventually go to Harad. That would lead more directly to a desert. But in-game, there is already the road from South Athelion which leads to a blocked-off southern Gondor zone. And this southern Gondor zone is just north of Harandor, which is the intermingled Harad and Gondor area, and from what I have seen, not quite full desert, but a lot of things with that are kind of inconsistent and kind of sparse, the information on that is. But if Standing Stone Games went the route of just following this road from what we have in game, it would probably be quite a while before we even reach any desert is kind of the point here. So really only SSG knows what's going on, but again, my first reaction of seeing this vision and desert was Harad, and that is what inspired this whole video. Now, I don't know how many phases this has. If it's like Mario, it'll be 3, but we will see. Ooh, this one. I wonder if this is what LOTRO would look like if they added a desert in, like, supposedly what Harad is. Because all the other places are, like, familiar. That one was completely unfamiliar. At least a tiny bit close to, like, Ingmarish, that type of dead. This was just like Mario 3 times. Briefly, I do want to cover the third hint of Harad, which is the expanded collections map. This was expanded in the pre-patch for Gundabad and ultimately expanded up north into the Forwardway territory. But there was also a huge expansion in the south, which includes locations all the way from southern Gondor to quite far south in Harad. And just like the Puglok vision, this could be meaningless, but it is a bit suspicious that they went very far south, as if it is perfectly preparing the map to be expanded into Harad in the future. So now that that covers the 3 major hints of Harad for LOTRO's future, for the last section of this video, I'll cover the question on would I be excited for Harad if that is in LOTRO's future? Well, I actually have some mixed feelings here. On one hand, a desert would add landscape and biome variety in LOTRO, which would be nice. And based on a bit of research I have done, Harad is mostly sand dunes with some oases and more vegetation along the coast. I think it could be a really neat area to explore and visit. Also, if it looks anything like the vision of Puglok, I definitely would enjoy seeing more of that type of stuff in LOTRO and would enjoy seeing Harad by that. But on the other hand, I honestly just can't get that excited about a war against Haradrim. To me, fighting evil humans as an ultimate enemy is one of the most boring things in an MMO, actually. So while planning this video out, I actually began to wonder why I wasn't as excited as I felt like I should be about Harad, and I think it ultimately led to Haradrim Corsairs being why. And this goes back to Gondor, actually. I will say, while they were neat talking about Haradrim evil humans, they were neat as like a small puzzle piece or even as a focus for an instance or two as enemy types, and even just scattered about throughout the game or different zones, those types of enemies. Ultimately, they just feel boring to me as like the ultimate evil of an area. If we contrast Haradrim with recent foes, such as, like, we have the classic orcs, of course, and then Morrowind, ginormous spiders, fell spirits, all that sort of stuff around Mordor and Minas Morgul, and eventually when we went up north, it led to drake swarms, wargs, more orcs, goblins, hobgoblins, Ingmarum, and then, of course, many more drakes, which was exciting. Ultimately, I think it feels like a step down to go back to Haradrim from that, and they just seem plain and boring to me in comparison is the reality. That said, if we broaden our vision, there can definitely be other enemies in Harad, and I am hopeful Standing Stone Games can make it way more epic than just evil humans, kind of like I'm making it sound here. We already have been potentially exposed to the elemental thunderstorms, and there are also the giant Mumakil, which could be quite fun to have back. And just for other enemies there could be scorpions in the desert climate, as well as other wild creatures that could be of interest. And I don't know in Lord of the Rings lore if there are any dragons, but sometimes dragons are associated with deserts. That I think could be pretty neat. And really, I think this comes down to the level of epicness in Harad really depends on Standing Stone Games. And I think overall my excitement for Harad would depend on how interesting they can make it, given the level of, like, plain boringness that I personally felt while dealing with Haradrim throughout, like, it was a long period of time we dealt with them. I think that's one reason I'm kind of tired of them even nowadays, is it was like 5 or 6 major updates worth of content throughout Gondor. But anyway, we should get moving on because if I continue on about this, it does get a little bit too much off topic. But suffice to say, Gondor can be fun to quest through, but given the relatively non-epic nature of the enemy, specifically the Haradrim, it's something I just don't care to go back and visit, and by extension, that makes me less excited for Harad, especially given the exciting world building possibilities there. And with that, it is also time to wrap up the video. Again, Harad is not definitely coming as LOTRO's next expansion in major storyline, but there are uniquely 3 strong hints for Harad as LOTRO's future after Gundabad. Please do let me know what you all think, first if you do believe Harad is next, and what you would think about Harad. And with that, I hope you all enjoyed the video and maybe learned something useful about LOTRO's potential future. And if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content, and thanks for watching, everyone.